Hello and welcome to Beyond Business, the program where we look at how countries and companies compete in the global economy. Is there such a thing as a low-cost war in terms of manpower as well as money? Today we're looking at the changing face of armed conflicts. Countries are going to great lengths to avoid putting their soldiers in harm's way. And instead of boots on the ground, the focus is shifting to high-tech warfare from afar. The United States is a case in point. After painful and expensive campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, its strategy is seen to be changing. But that's not an isolated example, as our report shows.
Southern Lebanon, July 12, 2006. Israeli tanks going at full pelt. The army was hitting back at the kidnapping of two of their soldiers by the armed branch of Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shiite movement. Over the course of 5 bloody weeks, the Israeli Defense Force used 20,000 bombs, 2,000 missiles, and 120,000 shells. On the other side, 3,000 Shiite fighters retaliated with rockets. Their aggressive riposte took Israeli military by surprise. It came as a blow to the IDF's pride and also put a dent in the government's finances. For every fighter killed, the state spent $10 million. All that without managing to neutralize the armed militants or free the kidnapped soldiers. For this military researcher, Israel's failure is symptomatic of a shift in the Western model of warfare.
We're in a situation where we're using extremely sophisticated equipment, originally designed for use by traditional armies in the Cold War, the forces who signed the Warsaw Pact. Now that's being deployed against guerrilla fighters. In short, people armed with Kalashnikovs and rocket launchers from the 1960s. Quite basic weapons.
Faced with local fighters on familiar territory, armed with improvised weapons and crucially ready to die for their cause, regular soldiers are becoming overwhelmed, as are the resources and finances of their countries. Expenditure on traditional armies account for some 90% of global military budgets. The war in Afghanistan alone costs the U.S. $2 billion every week, but the success rate is limited.
What's strange is this attitude of zero risk. What I mean is that we're in a situation where there's such a fear of human loss that armies have a hard time carrying out effective action. Armies take fewer risks to reduce the loss of human life. The thought is that public opinion won't back the operations if there are heavy losses.
In a bid to avoid any human loss, the military's increasingly swapping the trenches for remote operations, striking from afar. But it means that victory is still far off on the horizon. Colonel Iluan headed up a battalion in Afghanistan for 6 months. In his experience, relying on the soldier is a risky business.
Well, yes, indeed. On the ground, it's easier for democracy to pour in more money than increase the number of men and women in the field. Because as head of the army, the president, with the parliament's backing, gives the order to enlist 4,000 men, not one more.
A French think tank has estimated that some 700,000 would be necessary on the ground in Afghanistan. Now the coalition puts that figure at 130,000, and it's a similar scenario in Iraq.
At the height of the American operations in Iraq, there were fewer foot soldiers in the country than there were policemen in New York. If you really want to have an impact, it's no secret. Either you send more troops or you train more locals.
The Americans went for a third option, calling in private military contractors to provide the manpower.
These are people who you don't have to pay as much. There are no pensions to pay. It works on contract, so it's extremely flexible.
Flexible and much cheaper. The logic is hard to resist. It seems that in the future, the low-cost option of mercenaries could put soldiers out of work, in which case armed conflict could become a long-term business plan for these private companies.
Okay, let's get more now on the changing face of war. Joining me here in the studio is Olivier Kempf. He's a lecturer at the Politics University Sciences Po here in Paris. He's also the author of a book in French called Les Guerres Low Cost, which translates into low-cost wars. Welcome to France 24.
Thank you, hello.
First, could you help us with the definition of a low-cost war? How would you define it?
I start from the economic life. What is low cost in economic life? Well, lower standards, but very much lower price. So the idea in the war area is we have all in the idea the feeling of First World War, Second World War, big masses fighting together, industrial wars, technological wars. Nowadays, these symmetric wars have disappeared, and now you have asymmetric wars. What does that mean? That means that you have local people who cannot oppose through the industrial model and who say, well, what can I do? I have plenty of people, plenty of soldiers. They will take more risk, but to get more damages. So a different use of the manpower, that's a low-cost war.
But how exactly does a country fight a low-cost war?
But that's the point, we Western countries, did not decide to fight low-cost war, but we faced low-cost warriors who fight us. So they took the initiative to take that kind of war, and we have to resist, to respond that way of war fighting.
Okay, but if a country goes out, so to speak, and fights a low-cost war, it doesn't necessarily mean a low-cost response, because the response can be high-tech.
Absolutely, and that's what we have in the program. First, you have the technology. The technology model was distant warfare with drones, was satellite observation, etc., etc. Second, you have the building up of a local army. He said in Afghanistan there is a need of 700,000 soldiers. Look at the Afghan National Army. They say there are now 300,000. So the Afghan army is controlling parts of Afghanistan. So the idea is to using local troops. What did we make in Libya? We strike from the air. And we have on the ground local boots, the National Transition Congress troops, local Libyan troops, not us. Okay.
But at the end of the day, can local fighters as well as high technology replace our own boots on the ground, having one's own soldiers on the ground?
Well, the idea is you need a mix of different answers. Your own troops, local troops on your side, private military companies, special forces, etc., etc. So you have to make a mix to respond those challenges.
Do you think then that the era of what you referred to as before, these great battles, the types of World War I and World War II that we've seen, is that era completely over? Are we never going to see that ever again?
Completely. You never can say. Prediction is a very difficult art. I would say nowadays, in the current conditions, this is less probable. And why? Because of nuclear. Because of nuclear, the major countries say, I don't want to go in a war because you have the danger of escalating to the extremes, and on the top of the extremes is nuclear, and nobody wants to enter that kind of things. But against a low-cost war, there is very few danger of that escalation. So that's why the probability is, yes, more low-cost wars.
Now, the report also mentioned the United States and its use of private security contractors, mercenaries, some call them. Do you think that their use will actually go up in the future as Western powers are looking for replacing or looking to replace their own soldiers?
There is an advantage with private military companies, which is an economic approach, which is they are a variable cost. You have a war, you take those PMCs, so those contractors, and when the war finishes, when you withdraw from Iraq or Afghanistan, you don't pay them anymore. So that's the idea, yeah.
But do you think then that as we see defense budgets diminish, it sounds then as if you're saying that yes, indeed, as defense budgets diminish, we're going to see more of those mercenaries, as I say, in the future?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say what will be the decision on the technological level we want. Do we want extra machines capable of doing blah blah and everything? The point is they are very, very, very expensive, and the point is, what are they designed for? They are designed for what kind of war? A high-cost war, but who is a challenger? And the point is probably probable wars will be less massive, less technological, and maybe we have to bid less on that kind of technology and make more economies.
But then we come back to that point of having boots on the ground, and perhaps that there is no replacement at the end of the day of having boots on the ground.
You always need to have boots on the ground. Why? Because war is not just a technical thing, that's a political thing. And you have to show, state has to show its determination, and how to show it by the official troops, and your troops on the ground is a sign that you are implicated in the conflict and that you want to reach a political goal, a desired end state.
All right, Olivier Kemp, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us here at Beyond Business. And with that, we're going to wrap up the program. Thanks for watching.